In the mid-1800s, deep in the heart of South Carolina, a young enslaved woman named Mary Bell was born on a sprawling cotton plantation owned by the Bythewood family. From the moment she could walk, her life was not her own. The fields were her world, and the sound of the overseer's whip was the rhythm of her days. Yet behind her quiet eyes was a mind sharper than the masters ever imagined, a spirit unbroken by chains, and a dream she dared not speak, to one day own the very land where she had been forced to bow. Mary's mother had always told her, "Keep your heart clean even if your hands are dirty." Those words guided her through years of toil. She worked harder than anyone, not because she loved the field, but because she believed that someday her endurance would mean something greater. She watched, listened, and learned. She noticed how her master, Thomas Bythewood, managed the land, how cotton was traded, and how accounts were kept. At night, while others slept, she whispered numbers and letters to herself, carving them in the dirt with a stick. Knowledge, she realized, was a kind of freedom. The Civil War came like a storm. The Bythewood men left to fight, and the plantation fell into chaos. The slaves were scattered, and for the first time Mary walked without fear of being called back. Freedom was not what she imagined. It was hunger, confusion, and uncertainty. But it was also possibility. When the war ended and slavery was abolished, she stood on the edge of the same fields where she had once bent in chains, and she promised herself she would never serve another master again. She began her new life with nothing but a worn dress and the will to survive. Mary found work as a laundress for soldiers passing through the ruined South. The money was small, but she saved every coin. She bought scraps of land no one wanted, pieces of earth worn out by years of cotton, and slowly turned them green again. Her hands, once forced to labor for others, now worked for her own future. She planted vegetables, raised chickens, and learned to trade. Her name began to spread quietly among freedmen and poor whites alike. Mary Bell Bythewood, the woman who made something out of nothing. Years turned into decades, and the world began to change. The Bythewood family, once powerful and proud, had fallen into ruin. Their mansion, once filled with the laughter of wealth, stood silent and crumbling. The family had lost everything: the land, the money, even the will to start again. The same house that had witnessed Mary's tears as a child was now for sale. When she heard the news, Mary felt her heart pound in her chest. The price was high, far beyond what she had ever imagined spending. But she saw more than a house. She saw justice. Every brick in that mansion carried a memory. Every stair once echoed the sound of her bare feet. Owning it was not revenge. It was redemption. She gathered her savings, every dollar earned through years of sweat and soil. She went to the town banker, a man who had once refused to serve her, and placed her coins on his desk. The banker laughed at first, but the title deed was soon in her hands. With trembling fingers, she signed her name, Mary Bell Bythewood, taking the same name that had once been forced upon her and turning it into her triumph. The day she stepped through the grand front doors, she wore her mother's faded scarf around her neck. The air inside smelled of dust and memory. She walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the banister, the windows. The echo of her footsteps was the sound of freedom fulfilled. Where she had once scrubbed floors, she now laid rugs. Where she had once served, she now sat at the head of the table. The townsfolk could hardly believe it. Some called it a miracle, others called it madness. But Mary said nothing. She simply lived quietly, letting her actions speak. She opened the mansion's kitchen to feed hungry children on Sundays. She gave work to widows and taught young girls to sew, so they would never depend on the pity of men. She turned a house built on cruelty into a place of care. As the years passed, she grew old, but never bitter. Her hair turned silver, her hands trembled, but her spirit remained fierce. When asked how she had done it, she would smile faintly and say, "God, don't forget the ones who keep walking." Her story spread far beyond the small town. Travelers came to see the house owned by the woman who had once been enslaved there. They stood before her gate and felt something powerful, not just awe, but a strange peace. In her final days, Mary would often sit on the front porch as the sun set behind the cotton fields. She would look at the land, now green and full again, and whisper prayers for those still struggling. The same soil that once took her childhood had given her victory. When she passed away quietly one summer evening, the townspeople gathered to honor her. They buried her on the hill overlooking the mansion, her gravestone simple but strong. It read only, "Mary Bell Bythewood." She owned what once owned her, and even after her death, her story lived on. Generations spoke of her name with reverence, a symbol of faith, endurance, and divine justice. Children were told that no matter how deep the darkness, light always finds its way through those who refuse to stop believing. The mansion still stands, though time has worn its edges. Some say, when the evening wind passes through the old halls, it carries the faint sound of a woman humming. The same songs Mary used to sing as she worked in the fields. A song of pain turned into power. And so the enslaved woman, who once had nothing, became the owner of everything that tried to break her. Her story is not just of freedom, but of faith that never dies, a quiet reminder that the human soul, when guided by grace, can turn chains into crowns.